Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us today. We have Sebastian Lutz here. He is one of our former amazing FM swimmers. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. More than happy to be a part of it.
Now, you're out in beautiful California, I believe. Is that right?
Yep, I'm living in Los Angeles now.
Okay, great. And so we're going to dig right in and find out a little bit more about your swimming career and how it got started and kind of all the way through here. So let's start right out. What got you started in swimming?
Sure. So when I was growing up, I played basically every sport under the sun: basketball, soccer, volleyball, lacrosse. Like a lot of people who started swimming in the Northeast, I mostly competed casually during the summer on local teams and rarely practiced. It was usually a show up and swim type of event. My father had swam for the University of Pennsylvania years back, and after I had tried what seemed like every sport, when 7th and 8th grade came around, he encouraged me to try swimming. And I tried out for the local YMCA swim team under Coach Tiny Randazzo, who is really, a Northern New Jersey legend in her own right. And she actually competed in the 1972 Olympic trials. She qualified. From what I recall, it was a simple tryout. It was just 450s, one of each stroke. It was a whole mess trying to get ready for the tryout. I had to figure out how to do a flip turn and backstroke, and I didn't do it right in the tryout. Ended up banging my head into the wall, but at the end of the day, they deemed me good enough to join the team, and thus began my swimming career.
So did they now then call you a headbanger because you did that?
Not unfortunate. Thankfully, they spared me of that, but
that's very funny. That my first experience when I was swimming in the first lap was I banged my head on the wall twice before I finished one lap. Yep. So unfortunately, mine was on the other side of the pool. So anyway, so tell us a little bit about some of the highlights of your swimming career.
Sure. I think there's a few. The first would be winning YMCA Nationals in 2 individual events my senior year of high school and qualifying for the 2016 Olympic trials in that meet. It was the culmination of years of training, and it was a goal that I had set out to achieve when I first started swimming. So to be able to achieve it after many years of practice was certainly a great experience for me and a great feeling. Then following up on that, swimming at the 2016 Olympic trials and representing a great team. I swam for Harvard and had great coaches and great teammates. I'm very grateful for that entire experience. Another one would be winning the Ivy League championships a few times and setting a few records while doing it as part of relays. And there's 2 more that I think stick out that are a little unusual. One would be going to Auburn early in my career for the Brett Hawk swim camp for one specific reason. And this was before I had found you and your company, of course. And another one was the time during one of our lessons where you requested that I swim a 50 underwater. I don't know if you remember that, but it certainly made an impact on me. So to circle back to the Auburn one to kind of, I guess, flesh that out a little bit more. I went when I was 13 or 14. It was at the onset of my career. I started late. It was a fun little trip. We drove 14 hours down to Alabama, my father and I. And I was essentially there to figure out how to swim, see the lay of the land, figure out what was going on. And I think my father just wanted to go play golf while I was at the camp. That was late thousands. Auburn at the time had the benefit of having 16 athletes who had just competed in the 2018 Olympics just in swimming. And, those are household names like Kirsty Coventry and Cesar Cielo. And of course, Rowdy Gaines was the one announcing the Olympics from the swimming perspective. And the camp did a good job of introducing us to these folks, the professional swimmers. And even Rowdy came around and swam with us. And I actually have his autograph. It's the only autograph that I have hanging in my room, and it says "Go Sebastian" on it. I know exactly where it is on my corkboard.
He's such a nice person, isn't he?
Yeah, he's great. And these athletes would come around, they would coach us, they would swim with us. We even got to sit down with them and ask them a few questions. And for every single athlete we spoke to, including Rowdy, there was one girl who was part of the group who was about 8 to 10. Then she was kind of on the younger side for the group as a whole, would always ask, was there ever a point at which you didn't like swimming? And I think that to everyone's surprise, although looking back it makes sense, everyone said yes. And Rowdy even went as far as to say that there were points that he hated swimming. And I hope that if he sees this, he'll confirm that point. And that kind of candor meant a lot to me when I began to see what that really meant. And when you think about it, the daily slog of practice, waking up before it's light out and getting into a cold pool, were there times where I didn't like swimming? Absolutely. But the one thing that kept me going was that I knew at the end of the day, it was all part of the practice with a capital P. It was a concerted effort day by day, where each incremental day was making yourself marginally better, 0.01 seconds of improvement per practice, so that over time you could drop time, achieve something great and better yourself. And I think that is not only a part of swimming, but a part of life is learning that discipline. Everything ebbs and flows, times are good, times are bad. But if you have a goal and you work towards it every day, incrementally, to get to your goal, you're going to get there. And I think if I had enjoyed every moment, then I probably wouldn't have been able to get where I did. You need to make sacrifices.
It's not that just like starting out and then there's this piece in the middle that just doesn't show up, and you're just all of a sudden from where you are transported to the top of the mountain.
Exactly.
It's actually the climbing that makes you a great person.
Exactly. You need to make sacrifices to be able to compete and to succeed. And that's, it's succinctly not always the most fun to do, but it's a very necessary part of the journey if you want to achieve the goals that you set out.
And that the guidance, I mean, you've had great coaches all along, you've had people that, right, mentors, things like that, to help you along. And look at the difference in what turns out when you go through, they say the easy road gets harder and the harder road, right, gets easier usually. Yeah. And so you can see that investment of time and effort and et cetera is starting to pay off in your life. And you're a pretty fast swimmer, right? What was it? You swam the 50 free. I disagreed with some of the events later. I thought you could be an amazing IMer. I kept saying that, but you were also very, very fast in the 50. How fast did you go in your 50?
Yeah, the jury, before we go to that, the jury's still out on my backstroke. I can definitely do a convincing butterfly breaststroke at freestyle, but the jury's still out on backstroke.
We need a couple more weeks of work on the backstroke then.
Yeah, exactly. I just could never, one arm would always go in a funky direction, but in any case, and it still happens. It still happens. I was swimming backstroke a couple weeks ago out in a beautiful pool in Santa Monica, and just thinking about all the stuff that I could fix with my backstroke. But in any case, to answer your question, in the 50, I was 19.6.
Okay. Got it. And that made you one of the fastest swimmers ever in Harvard, if I'm right.
Yeah, Harvard's had the privilege of having a lot of great swimmers for sure, but definitely up there in terms of the top contenders. Right. My favorite race was the 2 medley, the 50 breast. I was 23.6 in the 50 breast off the block. I love that race. I love breaststroke.
I gotta say, that's amazing. Wow.
That's the one thing I wish I had swam a little bit more of.
Yeah. So you had so many cables, and that's why I thought the IM was such a big deal for you, because the breaststrokers tend to dominate the IMs, and you are so dominant in some ways in breaststroke, but you didn't even show it at first. It was just like another stroke for you. But when you got going, wow, could you move? Well,
I think I attribute that to a facet of just starting late. It's a point of pride to me, and perhaps other folks may disagree, but in my swimming career, I never swam a 1500 in a competition. I never swam 1,000 in a competition, and I never swam a 400 IM in a competition, which I think very few people can say. But from my perspective, when I was starting out at 14, I had a lot to catch up on. Right. And so the shorter races that were more technique focused, as opposed to endurance focused, I think I saw as more of an avenue to achieve success in the shorter period of time than those longer distance events.
Yeah, I think I would have probably, had I continued on with you and trained you personally, would have taken you into those longer events. I think you would have seen massive success in there too, just because there's a lot that was still available. You had so much to continue to develop. Even when you finished, I think you were just amazing, like at a starting point. There's so much you could do. Okay, so tell me a little bit about what motivated you to seek us out.
I didn't really know how to swim. There was no framework that existed in my life that enabled me to have a visual representation, an external visual representation to say, this is where your hand is supposed to be at this point in the stroke. This is how hydrodynamically it works. There was no resource that turned it from something that was just a black box into something that made a lot of sense and that I could actively try to achieve. And Fluid Mechanics had done a fair bit of marketing at the meets that I would go to around New Jersey. And I think I recognized, and my father recognized again, that I was early on in my career and I needed all the help that I could get. And your company provided those resources to help me achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve. Say what you want about strength and flexibility, energy systems, fuels, and mind. They're all important. But in my mind, if you don't have the right stroke, you can put as much horsepower behind it as you want, and you're still going to go slower than someone who knows what they're doing from a technique perspective. And that's why it was so important to me. It was because it is where the rubber meets the road, as they say, as you like to say.
That's right. That's where the rubber meets the road. Without that, it's a problem. You remember that one, huh?
Absolutely.
Yep. And so at what age did you come to fluid mechanics?
Oh, I want to say about 14, 15.
And when had you started racing?
Around the same time, probably maybe 6 to 12 months prior to that was really when I first dove into the swimming world, if you will.
Wow. So that really, it wasn't long before you recognized, hey, I can use some help and I can catch up here. And
yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of later compared to like the kids that are starting at 9 years old, right? And so you missed maybe 5 years of training in there. And the idea was to catch you up, change the trajectory and move you ahead as fast as we could in a good way, a good positive way. Important when we say as fast as we could is you don't want to sacrifice the experience and the knowledge, right? There's a lot of that time that you spend learning is important, but it's important that you step forward during that instead of search around a lot when you don't have a lot of time.
Right. And the process itself was very well thought out. We were not looking at the most detailed models that we possibly could when I first started. The freestyle stroke, for example, was maybe 3 or 4 different components that we put together. And it wasn't until those components had really been set in stone that we then said, okay, let's take it another step further and break the stroke down into more components and continuously refine it, continue to improve it. And in that way, I was never overwhelmed. And I think, from a coaching perspective, it makes the most sense for your students. It's just like learning anything. Doesn't matter what discipline it is. You start with the broad concepts, and then as you become more proficient within each concept, you dive down and you learn more.
Right.
And improve your knowledge.
Yeah. And we actually have a map that shows you where you are, kind of here you are, right? So we started with the keystones and we go down into the dimensions and then we go farther into, right, the expert level and the elements, things like this. So
no, I mean, listen, John, I think, and I want to make this clear, and I think this is important, because I think without a doubt, and feel free to quote me on this, I personally would not have achieved what I did in swimming without fluid mechanics.
Thank you.
I came in when I was 13 or 14. I had swam for years on summer teams, but had never really swam for a full-time club team. And the way that you framed it, built a model around the strokes, gave it names and visuals, and made it easier to learn. I won't say it was easy because I distinctly remember on several occasions getting frustrated. And you were very supportive throughout the entire experience as well. And when all that comes together, it teaches you how to swim in the best and most efficient way. And that is without a doubt the most important thing to me.
Thank you. So how long did you train with us?
I trained for the majority of high school for about 3 years and change in high school. And then you were still available to me in college. And, granted, because I was up in the Massachusetts area, I couldn't come to see you as frequently, but when I had breaks, we would come down, do some refreshers, catch up, things like that. And I think at the time at which I was training with you on a regular basis, it was something to the tune of every week or every other week, mostly on the weekends. And I liked the way that that was structured because it allowed me to swim and improve my endurance and flexibility and strength in the pool during the week. And then on the weekends, we would break down the technique, learn something new, do instead of a practice where we'd be swimming 6,000, 7,000 yards, we would maybe only cover 1,000 yards during practice. But every lap that we did was it was a concerted effort, very well thought out. And then in the subsequent week, I could take those lessons and incrementally apply them to the practices that week.
So it's
So it was
almost kind of like feeding it.
yeah, it was this cycle of continuous improvement. You learn something new on Saturday, and then come Monday, every stroke, you have the opportunity to try it again. And that's the great thing, is that it's so repetitive. So in every stroke, you get the opportunity to try to improve your efficiency and your skill. If you're not careful about it, then you can get into kind of a downward spiral. And I think that where your skills actually become worse over time, because muscle fatigue, you aren't thinking about, how you should be swimming from a technique perspective. And having in the back of my mind what the stroke needed to look like at every practice, because of all the models that you created and all the lessons that we had, really was just of immense value to me.
So you feel like the animations and the avatars that we use really kind of made an impact on you, so you could see what was going on and then visualize it?
Absolutely. I think that is probably the most critical thing to me in terms of learning, because I'm a visual learner.
Right.
I know that about myself. If I see something, it's much easier for me to learn and apply than if we just talk about it. I think that it basically, again, to put it succinctly, gave me the tools that I needed to succeed in my swimming career. And that really made all the difference to me, because the success that I found in my swimming career directly related to the success that I found in other areas of my life. Swimming, I'll be the first to say it, swimming got me into college. Swimming enabled me to have a wonderful education, both in the pool and outside of the pool. Swimming on a collegiate team is an unbelievable experience. It really gives you an opportunity to learn truly how a team works, because club teams in high school, they are teams, but the game really changes when you are part of a team in college. But to kind of get back on the road here, the discipline that swimming taught me, the skill set that I developed, both from a more intangible emotional standpoint, as well as more of an internal standpoint, really just have been invaluable to me in many ways throughout my personal life, throughout my career. And I think that fluid mechanics is the catalyst for a lot of that.
So generally, again, it's something you kind of answered already, but what does swimming mean to you?
Oh, sure. I think so. I have all these anecdotes. So to put a little bit of context around this, I think it'd be helpful to kind of answer this question if I tell a little anecdote prior to answering it. But when I was a freshman in college, we had an entryway, which was essentially just the floor of your dorm. So everyone that lived on the floor was part of a group called an entryway. And as part of the initiation, within the first couple of weeks, we sat down with the counselor or someone as part of that orientation process. And she gave us 4 flashcards and had us write down one word on each that we identified with. And I think this is a great exercise. You could choose whatever you wanted to write. You could write, swimmer, whatever 4 words that you chose. And she then had us face them down so that we couldn't see what we wrote on them, fan them out like you would a deck of cards, and then had someone else pick out one of the cards from the 4. She then continued on to say, well, imagine that the person who just took that out won't recognize you for the piece of your identity that you felt was part of you. And I think that there's a larger conversation to have about this, and this is a great exercise. But I did write swimmer, and someone on one of my cards, and if someone took that away from me, didn't recognize that that was part of my past and part of who I am and how I got to be where I am now, then there would be something missing. And I think, to answer your question succinctly, what does swimming mean to me? It means a lot. It's just part of my life, and it still is. I still swim. I just recently got involved with a great program out in LA called Swim with Heart, and swim with that group on the weekends. It's a nonprofit founded in 2010 that aims to teach children how to swim. And one of my coaches in high school, Peter Barry, a great man, said that his goal was always to get his swimmers to swim for their entire lives. And I think he certainly achieved that with me.
I know Peter, and he is an amazing man. Absolutely. So fantastic. That was a great way to put it. So why do you feel that swimming is such a valuable pathway for young swimmers and people getting into the sport? Kind of speaking to not only the swimmer, but also to the parents that are considering, what they want their children to do as they develop through their, up through their high school and beyond.
Sure. I mean, I think swimming teaches you a lot. We touched upon the discipline item earlier. I think it keeps you physically fit, which is important. It gives you a great group of friends to be part of. And additionally, it teaches you how to act in a team. I think that's a very important aspect of it all. It's an interesting aspect of swimming that you don't always have to rely on someone else to get the job done. There are opportunities there. You can relay, but most events you swim by yourself. And sure, the team's still there, cheering you on and has helped you along in practice, just as you have helped them along. But you're the one there doing the work. And I think that's been good for my career as well, in the sense that teams are great and they're useful and each individual has their contribution. But it's also important to remember that your contribution has the capacity to be significantly impactful on its own. You can score points with the team in a relay, but you can also score points for the team on your own, and recognizing that you can be uniquely impactful on your own accord in situations where you may not have the benefit of the team, I think is incredibly important. It's a very wholesome experience. You really learn a lot about yourself, and there really isn't anything else like it. And I'm sure, a lot of other athletes would say, well, there are other sports like it, but for me, because it was my experience, it was very unique.
So you're 99 years old. You're sitting in your rocking chair and you're looking back at your life.
Sure.
How do you look at that swimmer side of it? What did it do? You're smiling tomorrow. Maybe it's the last day on earth. Maybe you're 120, right? Whatever it is, you look back and you say, you know what? I'd love to see that you had a smile on your face from that.
Sure. I think it was as positive of an experience as it could have been. I think at that point, I would be thinking that swimming was, and of course, this is exceptionally multifaceted, topic, but swimming was one of the major contributing factors that led me to be successful up to this point. And, I'm only 25. Hopefully those lessons will continue to pay dividends as I continue on through life. I think that it's simply the most important period of my time that will have set me up, hopefully, for eventual success.
And right,
however you define it. That
whole development process, because we're so heavily influenced during that age, right? And to have great mentors during that time, and people like Peter Barry and right, those folks and your original coach, all these pieces. And you had, if I'm right, extremely supportive parents on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was exceptionally important to me, and not everyone is able to have that experience, and I feel exceptionally grateful for it. My father had the opportunity to come to every single swim meet that I went to. Didn't matter where it was, but because of his job, he was able to make the time to come, and it's a sacrifice. And I think having him there was hugely beneficial to me, because it really laid the ground for that kind of support, or for the support that I needed to be able to build, something greater.
Your both your father and your mother, I remember, sitting in the stands with them on numerous occasions, or standing there talking to them, and they contributed back to fluid mechanics in a whole unique way, in regards to, like, they're both being doctors. They helped us with advice for some of our consultants, and actually saw one of our the coaches that was related to our program, and just and everything was just so supportive and nice. They always wanted to give back, and it was just really nice, very nice family. So
yeah, thank you. I'm very privileged that I've had such wonderful parents.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that I would have liked to have, which I didn't have for you, we had some of the tools, but we hadn't built them out in the way we have now in the fast track. And so now the tools are more visual. They're more organized. So we were using them to help swimmers along the way, like the time splits that we use for you, things like this.
Yep.
And now we've developed more tools, and right, the kids have direct access with the animations now, and so do coaches and parents. So during the pandemic, we put those together, and we actually brought like a price way down, so we can make them available to countries that may not really have the finance to do them, and it helps us spread the word farther throughout the world. And so that's the one thing I would say, had we had that earlier, we would have had a faster and more clear impact, gotten you there like more quickly and probably a little bit more thoroughly.
Very grateful to have worked with you and gone through the program. So certainly more than happy to sit down and have a conversation with you.
Thanks so much. We'll look forward to when you bring your kids here.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I may be a little bit older looking at that point, but I've already gone some.
All right. Thanks so much, John.
Great, Sebastian. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Take care.